What's going on, everybody? Chris here with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal in Southeast Florida. We just pulled into our storage complex. We will be cleaning out the majority of our storage unit today. I have a 10 by 20 outdoor unit I've been using for resale items that we sell on Facebook, and the price increased to $104. And I was already kind of getting pushback from the storage unit because I spend a lot of time and energy with it. And although sometimes we do pretty good reselling throughout the month, it's not worth the overall time and energy for it. So we are going to be cleaning it out today entirely and closing it by the end of the month. And we're going to be bringing it all home to my 9x9 garage, where our objective is, instead of selling just anything and everything as cheap as like $10 at a time because volume, but we're going to be sticking more to like a nicer nightstand that I could post for like $40 on its own. If I have a pair, I could probably post it for $70. You know, console tables, side tables, end tables, coffee tables, you know, a smaller, nicer dresser or a chest, or, you know, nicer mirrors, stuff like that. I did my garage where I have a whole side of it. It's going to be empty, and it's going to be for staging purposes. So it has a nice clean wall. I even put up a little picture hook. So if I have a nice mirror, a nice picture, I could put that up either for decoration pieces like accents or for reselling purposes instead of sticking it like on the ground against the wall. So that's the idea, is to only keep like really nicer stuff I think we could sell pretty well, or like nicer antiques that aren't broken, and really push for that. Whereas normally, like if I came out here to resell, let's say a $20 item, the amount of time it takes me to get to the storage unit, wait for the person to get here and get back home is the same than if I did a $100 item. So with that logic, I'm thinking, all right, well, if there's really nothing I could do time-wise, let's just bring it home. And instead of selling these $10 items where it would take me 5 of those time trips to make the same as $50, I could just sell one item with very little to no time and make the same amount. So that's the idea behind it. I figured, since it's such a common thing to resell stuff in junk removal, I would argue that most people, even though when they come across a really nice piece that they want to resell or maybe keep for their own house or give to a family member or something, they probably handle it in a similar fashion as they do everything else. You might just put it in the truck differently and not just throw stuff on top of it. But a lot of times, handling stuff a certain way without really caring about it leads to damage. So I figured I'll go ahead and show you guys some of the things I watch for and I intentionally do to help prevent that said damage when handling items I want to either resell or keep. So there's going to be a few different tactics. I'll explain my reasoning behind certain things, and hopefully it gives you guys an idea if you go into a house and you see a really nice desk and you're like, wow, that would be great to resell or great to keep, but you know, you don't want to bang it up in the process. So hopefully this will help. And it's 96 degrees outside right now, and it's 12 o'clock, and which means it's only going to get hotter. And I kind of want to try to get this done fast. So let's get started. Here's a quick little recap of everything we got going on here. Like I said, this is a 10 by 20 storage unit. Before we get started, if you guys have a trailer similar to mine with a ramp that comes down and you have trouble with this lovely lip here, which gives a lot of problems when you have a dolly and you have something heavy on it, because if you run straight into it, you don't go anywhere. It's a stopper. And that can cause a lot of issues, especially like when I have my Speed Paks full of heavy stuff. It's really hard to get up because I can't pull back on the piece to lift it. So that comes in, that poses a threat quite often. So if you can get a curb ramp, this one is custom made by my brother's fabrication company, but you can buy these online relatively cheap. You can get some little foldable aluminum ones that are, they're probably like 30 to maybe $50, probably less. But that way I can just roll right on. And you can also bring these with you in case you go to a job. Maybe you have like an upright piano, for example, and you have to go out a large step. If you have one of these, one, it'll make it a little easier going out the doorway, especially if you're by yourself. But number two, it comes in handy to where one of the big problems with going out door steps with a longer piece on a dolly is when that first wheel touches the ground and you continue pushing the dolly out, eventually the backside is going to come crashing down. And if it's low enough to the ground, it's likely going to smack the floor before it gets past the weather strip. So if you have tile or hardwood floor and it smacks it, you pose damage, potential damage. So I talked about that in my upright piano video. I mentioned I didn't really have a big step coming out the door, but if you did, when you come out with that first wheel and you're on an angle, it would be a good idea to bring either a moving blanket or piece of cardboard and stick it on that back side intentionally for that drop. So just something to keep in mind. A curb ramp can kind of help cancel out that drop though, because you're not going to have to worry about it coming crashing back down. So food for thought. We're going to talk real quick about equipment before we get into stuff, because there's different types of dollies that you can buy. There's a handful, but we're going to stick to two because it's more common. And it really comes down to how they are designed, but they do have slightly different pros and cons to them. So I'm going to keep it super basic. We're not going to get into all the nitty gritty. I'm just going to basically go off of what I like to perceive it as being beneficial for. So when it comes to dollies, if you go on, like, let's say a moving website or you buy something online, you're probably going to see two different types. You'll see something like this that is flat and then it has a ledge, usually rubber caps or like a carpet top or something. Or you'll see more of a flat top like this, usually with this kind of matting or, again, carpet, but it's just flat all around. Now, for me, I personally use this one for most furniture item pieces because of its overall flat surface. I don't have to worry. Can you stand up? Thank you. The reason I like the flat surface all around is, let's say, for example, I'm putting this on the side of the dresser and standing it up. I don't have to worry about it hooking on this and then dropping down and then sliding back up because it's now on the diagonal. This has a little bit of grip to it. It's flat all the way through. It just makes for a more stable surface area when I'm dollying a piece of furniture. However, this one, because it typically has bigger wheels, not always, but usually these are 4-inch wheels, these are 3.5-inch wheels over here. Plus it has an extra lip on it, so this would be the same length as this one. But because it has an extra top on it, that means whatever you put on it is going to be just a little bit higher off the ground, roughly about 2.5 to 3 inches off the ground altogether. So let's say you have a piece of furniture that maybe has higher feet on it and you want to put it on the bottom. By having this on there, I just gave myself a couple more inches of clearance, so I don't have to worry about it catching the floor if I have to go over a weather strip or go over a little bump. So that can help out there, and you keep the feet off the ground if you're trying not to damage the piece. In addition, these ones are typically used for mattress bars. So you see those black bars I use all the time, those are mattress bars. They hook on this dolly right over this little ledge here. Now, they can go on this dolly, they can, but they're a little looser because the wood is a little thinner. So that's where this can kind of come in handy. Makes it a little bit more of a firm grip, so you don't have to worry about the bars going like this. It keeps it a little bit more upright. So those are the main differences for it. So I'll likely use this for my Speed Paks if I'm not using my mattress bars, because it doesn't really matter because the Speed Pak is a flat surface area. But for most furniture pieces, I'm using the black top. And for most of these, actually all these pieces, I'll be using the black top as well. And when you're looking at dollies, I have a couple here I can show you, but they're under other pieces. Try to get the rubber casters that are at least 3 inches. And the reason being is when you have those like cheaper dollies from Harbor Freight and Home Depot and Walmart, they work, don't get me wrong, you can use them for stuff. People have been using them for decades. But they're not great when it comes to going over a rougher surface. especially with the heavier piece. It's kind of like when you ride it's kind of like being like on a skateboard, for example. If you're on a skateboard with those regular little plastic wheels, you feel every little pebble. Sometimes you might hit a rock just big enough that your skateboard will stop and fling you off. If you got one of those like skateboards with the big bulky rubber wheels on them that they use for more like semi off-ground or rough texture, you can run over a lot of little pebbles and never feel the effects because you have more ground surface area with the wheels. Some loud ass music. There's an apartment complex back there. So having these thicker, more dense rubber wheels can help you going over rough surfaces. So I would advise you get something more like this. You can buy, I've done this before. Actually, I've done for free. I've gotten those cheap dollies off of jobs, and then over time in garage cleanouts, I find those little caster wheels like this, just sitting in a box, or maybe it's on a tool bench, but I don't want the tool bench, so I'll take the caster wheels off and save them. Or you can buy these from Home Depot. They're not the cheapest. Sometimes it's cheaper just to buy a dolly like this for like 60, 70 bucks. But you can just take these casters and put them on any style dolly. The weight that's being held is usually coming from the dolly itself, not the wheels. So you can just get a good quality caster wheel and screw it or bolt it on to a regular cheap dolly, and then bam, you have the best of both worlds. So just something to keep in mind when it comes to wheels, because these kind of wheels are going to keep you rolling. No pun intended. Pun intended, actually. So let's start moving some bigger pieces. First up, we're going to start with this secondary hutch. Now, this isn't a super heavy piece. It's not huge by any means. It's 30 inches by 18 by 39. So not a huge piece, but it is an antique and it's a little bit more fragile. And you can see when there's scratches on this, and you don't want to create gouges. Scratches you can cover up and restain or use a furniture marker, but a gouge, a lot trickier to fix. So on the back, you have that press board, and that's old, which means it's easy to chip off, like this down here. But something like this, if I were to grab this with a hand truck, there's a good chance that the pressure of the hand truck will actually crack and peel this back. So something like this, even though it's the back, it's an antique piece. You don't want to screw this stuff up. So I would actually grab it from the front because it's a more stable surface, or I would grab it from the side. These feet aren't far enough away that I can't use the hand truck. So I can slide the hand truck right underneath it. I don't have to worry about the doors popping out. I don't have to worry about damaging the back side. The lip of the hand truck's not going to be touching anything. But what I'm going to do is either get a piece of cardboard to shove between the piece and the hand truck so it doesn't cause indents or scratches, or I'll get a pad and just kind of drape it over long ways and then take it out that way. So take my blanket, fold it hot dog style. I'm just going to drape it right over. The objective is to cover the whole piece. And I'm going to grab it from this side. Actually, let me show you guys one more thing for damage purposes of flooring. So something to keep in mind whenever you're in somebody else's house, whether it's tile or hardwood floor, laminate flooring, doesn't matter. You want to try to limit the amount of scratching you could potentially cause. So with the hand truck, you could tape it off, you could wrap it up, you can do whatever you want to make it smoother. You can still cause damage though from the pressure of it hitting the ground. So when you have a piece like this, you want to avoid this as much as possible. So when you're going to grab a piece of furniture or a stack of boxes, you want to try to lean the piece back to create an opening that you can slide this underneath it. But you're not just sliding it underneath because there's no pressure there. You want to lift the piece up with your foot just ever so lightly and move it like this. And try to minimize that scraping on the ground. So for example, this secretary desk, I'm going to lift it up like this. So it's off the ground right now, but I'm just going to lift it ever so lightly. And I'm going to guide my piece underneath it and then set it down. And now I can grab my piece and come back with it. the pad on, I pull it back, go out forward when you're going over little ledges and steps. Don't go backwards because everything goes clunk clunk. Go out forward with it so you can control the descent. So notice how you didn't hear any clunking? Let me show you what happened if I went backwards. There isn't much way you can prevent this. That's the difference. So think about going out somebody's doorway at their house, and it's a 4 to 8 inch drop. That's a big drop. So if you have a glass piece or a real fragile piece, there's a good chance it's going to get damaged or broken, and it doesn't sound good to the customer if you're happy to be moving. So now we go up a ramp, just like that. Now if I didn't have the curb ramp, it's not as big of a deal with the hand truck, but you will hear the difference. Hear the difference? That's why we have the curb ramp. Holy fuck, that's hot. God damn. Oh, I just burnt myself. Okay, so my metal flooring is extremely hot. I just burnt my kneecap, pretty sure. So, something like I mentioned with when you're going down, when you're lifting the piece up to slide the hand truck underneath it, you want to do the same thing if you're letting go of a piece. So let's say, for example, you're doing a junk removal and you had a piece in one bedroom and you're just trying to get it out into the living room. So you pick it up, you bring it out through the hallway, you put it in the living room, and then you're moving on to a different piece. Maybe you're just clearing it away so you had more room to work. When you put it down and you go to take the hand truck back out, a lot of people will just pull it out, scraping the floor. So we're going to repeat the same process we did when we loaded it. So while it's on the dolly, I'm going to lift the piece up so it's off the ground, grab my hand truck, lift the hand truck up just a little, and pull it out. Versus doing this. So next up, we'll take the Mission Hill desk. Now, this is a sturdier desk, but it's also very old, and it still has its fragile parts. In addition, these come out. So I don't want that to pop out when I'm lifting it up, because if I don't catch it in time when it hits the dolly, it's going to cause a problem. So when I move this, if it was junk, I would just stick it up and put the hand truck under it and take it out as is. However, I don't want that because, one, I don't want to dig into the edging here. I don't want to scratch the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the dolly, and I'm going to stick the dolly. Yeah, squish me. The dolly is going to go on the side like this, but it's going to hook right underneath the lip, and it's going to be sitting there on the side, and it's going to be extended up like this. So I'll show you a couple of things to watch out for and a couple of tips to help prevent floor damage. So what we are going to do is run this band around the whole piece, because both sides of these open up on both sides. The drawers I'm not super worried about in this instance, but just a friendly tip. If you guys are in apartment complexes, or you're in tight doorways or hallways or single-link facilities, it doesn't hurt to have something like this around. You can buy these on Amazon. They're called moving bands. You can also use tape. You can use shrink wrap. You can use a strap if you don't have any of those other things. And you're just basically going to run it around the piece to keep the drawers from popping out on you, especially if you have like swinging doors, like barn doors. So let's say you have like a console table, for example, a TV stand. If I go to stand that up on the dolly, if it's up like this, any door that usually will open up like this is going to want to pop open out of force of gravity, especially every time you go over a bump or you turn, you're shifting that weight around. And if that door slams open and smacks a door frame or smacks a wall, you're going to cause damage. So it's good to have these kind of things. The bands are nice because they're quick and easy. You can take it off and you reuse it versus having to buy tape all the time. So it's like an investment. But we're going to wrap it around the piece. So now, it can open with force. I'm forcing it, but it's not going to want to open on its own. So the next thing we're going to do, I just like being in the picture, I don't know. I talked about this in my upright piano video, removing a piano. If this was a heavier piece, or it had like metal feet underneath it, or caster wheels or something, unless you're on carpet, you want to put something underneath the feet to protect the floor, because at one point, I am going to be lifting this thing up on a diagonal, and all of the weight is going to be right here, and it's going to be very pinpointed in pressure. You don't have that surface area anymore. Think about snowshoes. If you have snowshoes on, you wear those because it spreads out your weight more, so you walk on the snow, versus if you were in your bare feet, you would just sink. It's that pinpointed pressure. So if you have a box, or if you have a blanket, you can literally use almost anything. You just want something to prevent the, don't use like paper or something, but you just want something to break that contact with the floor. So I don't have any boxes in here that aren't being used, so I'm going to use my blanket for this example, and I'll show you what I mean by that. And I also want to do it in a way where it's not going to interfere with my dolly next. So I'm just going to stick the blanket underneath it. It's double folded. I could just do single, it's not a super heavy piece, but if it was, you want to make sure you have as much protection as possible. But you also want it to be stable when you're lifting it. You don't want it to be off even, so don't like just shove a whole blanket underneath it. So I'm going to lift the piece up just a little, bring the blanket over. Now there's something protecting the floor. So now I'm going to lift the piece up. Grab one side of it, lift it up like so. You see that bang catching the door? Now, in this position, with most pieces, you can hold it just like this and be fine. It's not going to go anywhere. If it starts to tip back down, you grab the piece and you pull it back towards you. If it starts to drop down, you grab the piece and push it back up. Very easy. If it was a really, really heavy piece, I would be careful with it, but again, it's doable. So we're going to grab our dolly. Normally I wouldn't be down on my knee like this, but I'm showing you guys. So I'm going to stick the dolly underneath the piece, but like I said before, I want to try to get it underneath the lip at some point if I can, and I'll show you why. But I'm going to pull the piece up, hold the dolly. You want to come flush with the piece, because if I just have the dolly like this, and I stood this piece up, it's going to kick the dolly back, it's going to land halfway, it's not going to be stable, it's going to be hard to maneuver it again. But if I meet the piece, I can control that much more. And now once it's up, I can just shift it, I can hold the dolly with my foot, and I can just slide the piece until it's comfortably on. Now the reason I brought it past that ledge there, the reason I did this is so that when I'm going out the door or I'm going up a ramp, I know for a fact that it's not going to slide off, at least that way. So when I'm pushing it, I can control it so I know it's not going to want to go this way. It's one less obstacle to have to worry about. So when I'm going up the ramp, I am intentionally going to have the side where there's more dolly exposed go up first, because I want the heavier side. The reason I want the heavier side is I am going to lean the piece back to lift the dolly off the ground just a little. The reason I'm going to do this is it's going to give me a boost to go up an incline, aka the ramp. If I didn't have that curb ramp there and I had that lip that we talked about, this is where you would get past that lip. You could also do this if you're going out a doorway and you have a thick weather strip. Those weather strips are a fucking pain in the ass sometimes. So you would maneuver a piece, especially when you have longer pieces or like a couch. It's always going to sit in the middle. You're always going to be able to seesaw the piece back and forth by pushing down or lifting up on it. So when I'm going to a door with a weather strip, I'm going to push down on one side to raise it up just a little. And sometimes you might have to do it more than once because you'll raise the piece but not the dolly. Sometimes you want to do it kind of quick so it raises it at the same time. And you're going to guide it over. And then when you get to the other side, you're not just going to run because it's just going to hit the piece again. You're going to be stuck once again. So what you'll want to do is either use your foot to lift the piece if you have access to the dolly, or you can lift the whole piece up with the dolly. Again, you might have to do it a couple of times to guide it over. Just make sure that the other side that's now on a decline isn't going to scrape the floor. So this is where it just takes practice and technique. Like as you do it more and more, you'll get comfortable with it. It'll be like you don't even think about it anymore. It'll just be muscle memory. But I'll show you what I mean here. So because there's a ramp there, I could just hit this and go straight up it. That's the point of the ramp. Now, if I go straight, I can't go up my ramp. I can't go up the ramp. So, I'm going to lean the piece back, lift it up. So now you lift up on the piece, it lifts the dolly up with it, and you go right up. The last two pieces I'm going to show you guys, because it is getting increasingly hot out, is the desk that has the awkward feet that you could not use a hand truck for unless you were to stand it up and take it on the tabletop, which again, I don't want to scratch it. Or we're going to use this top piece here. Now this top piece isn't super heavy. I was able to lift it up top. But let's pretend it was really heavy and like I could not physically pick that thing up off the ground by myself. How would you move it? It's too spaced out for the dolly to go between the feet. It's kind of awkward. There's not a whole lot of space there, especially if the top part was the heavy part. I wouldn't be able to control it having it sit on just here, not to mention it's not even. This whole thing is just kind of annoying, right? Your best bet is probably going to be to put it on top and lay it flat and then wheel it out. But you got to get it up there first. Now let's pretend this was granite, something really heavy and thick that could easily damage the floor. How would you move it? How would you get it to that flat top position? We will be using our blanket once again. I am going to fold this up like a hot dog, which sounds really good right now. There's a Checkers right next to me. I don't mind their hot dogs, but I have a trailer, so I can't go in line, so that sucks. Home Depot doesn't do hot dogs anymore, which is really annoying. I don't know why they ever stopped doing that. That was great. Alright, so at this very moment, I'm going to cast a magic spell and say this thing weighs 250 pounds. This is a 3-inch thick granite top. Actually, probably 2 inches. It's a 2-inch thick granite top, super heavy, don't want to mess with it. And I can't really stick a dolly on the side because the problem, and I'll even show you guys, the problem with trying to put it on its side, even if you go sideways with the dolly, which is probably your best bet, even if I were to go up on the side like this, number one, it touches the ground, so I'd have to use the gray top, but it's not wide enough, so that's a problem. But even if it wasn't long enough, let's go this way. Okay, I stick it on the side. It's not very stable because it's sitting on the circle. Not to mention the piece itself is very unstable. But if this was a heavier top, it would want to lean towards me because there's nothing keeping this piece attached. Like this isn't sitting on the dolly. And if I were to try to stick it on the dolly, that's fine, but that's a lot of weight as well. And if this was truly a granite heavy piece, it would be very difficult to control it from wanting to shift one or two ways because it is technically an oval. It's a rectangle with rounded corners. So you could do this if you could control it and keep it in place and really control it when you're going outdoors and stuff. But keep in mind, let's say I go to shift it up and put it over a weather strip, it's going to want to shift. It's going to be all over the place. And if this is as heavy as we are making it to seem, then that would be dangerous because if this slips off and hits ground, it is going to destroy the ground. So that's why we wouldn't want to do that. Assuming this was like a 250-pound granite piece. So what we're going to do instead, super simple. We're going to lay the pad down on the ground. We're going to get on one side of this. We're going to lift it up with all of our might. Get it up on its top. we're going to leave the pad underneath it and deal with the annoyance of having to get a dolly around it. But the reason I want to leave the pad here is in case I slips out of my hands, at least there's something here breaking contact with the floor. So again, I'm going to keep the dolly either in my hand or I'll use my knee to keep it flush. Pull the piece with all of your weight. Get the dolly underneath it. Let it come down. You're holding it, you're controlling the descent all the way to the ground, and then you can roll it up. But now you are very stable, you're very secure. If you need to go over a weather strip or up the ramp, I can push on one side. You see the dolly coming up with it? So I can get this over the ramp now. I couldn't do that when it was standing up on an angle. I wouldn't be secure. It would be very hard weight distribution-wise. This would be your safest bet getting over a weather strip. So as I'm pushing it, I would lift it, go back down. When I got to the other side, I would lift up on the piece like this, and so on. Now with this desk, we have a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, it has drawers that would want to open, or one of the drawers open. There you go, these drawers open. We also have flaps for the leaves. So as I'm shifting this around, I have drawers that can pop out and I have leaves that can open up and then break off if they get hit. So once again, moving band or tape or shrink wrap or a ratchet strap, just don't make it too tight. So I'm going to run this around the perimeter to hold down both flaps and keep the drawers in place. And then I would only be able to use a hand truck if I were to stand it up on its side and then grab it right here. So the lip of the hand truck would go here, the base of it would go straight up. But I could cause potential damage. Now you could get a box and stick it on the hand truck like this, and that'll protect you right there. And then I could either get a longer box or get the pad and drape it over this and then band it and protect it that way. That is what I would do if I had to go downstairs with the piece. But again, the problem with doing that stuff, if you don't have to, is you have to think about pressure. So imagine this piece, bang it against this. There's a gap here, which means there's a spacer, but I can force it shut if I need to. If I have a hand truck, all the weight sitting on this corner, that's a lot of weight pushing against something that's not supposed to be closing. Not to mention eventually it's probably going to smack into right here and cause damage. So if I wanted to keep this piece or sell it, I don't want to do that because it's going to be an obvious damage piece. So my dolly would be the best bet. And this is assuming you're on the first floor. If you're on stairs, you don't have a choice unless you can carry it. This is not the best piece I would want to carry. I think I carried it onto my trailer because it was on the garage and it was right there, but it's very awkward. And if I recall, this actually does have a little bit of weight to it. Yes, it does. It was very annoying to carry. But what we're going to do in this situation is we're going to use a dolly, and I am going to either put it on its top like we did with the other piece, or I'm going to put it on its side. And you may be thinking, well, Chris, you just said if you put it on the side, this door is going to smack into it. Going down the stairs, yes. It'll be pressured against it this whole time, but it's not going to be smacking. I guarantee you the pressure of it sitting on there for enough time to get out to the truck, if it does cause damage, it'll be like a little indent. Versus if you go down the stairs, kind of like I talked about, when you go down backwards over lips, you hear that clunking noise that's smacking this into it. That's going to cause a lot more damage than just a steady pressure. So I know we're getting kind of technical with this stuff, but we're protecting stuff. So that's what we're talking about here. So I'll show you guys how I would get it up. It's going to be all the same as this piece. We're going to tilt it up carefully, but if you notice, we got the little metal caster wheels down here. Those will absolutely dig into tile or hardwood flooring or laminate flooring. So that's similar to like a piano wheel. You want to be careful with those. So we're going to stick our blanket underneath that ever so lightly. And then we're going to stand the piece up carefully, controlling the weight. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I can't physically show you over the video, but I'll explain it to you and hopefully you'll pick up on it. shit for no reason. All right, so I have the piece on the blanket to now protect the floor. Now, what I'm gonna do is lift the piece up the same way we did with the other one, except because these legs are kind of an odd shape, they're probably not quite as strong. Let's pretend they're not that strong, even though they look pretty durable. The problem with lifting pieces up like that is you do always pose a threat to snapping the legs. There's always a threat. Doesn't matter how strong you think the piece is, there's always a threat. Because you don't know the pre-existing condition, you don't know if it was repaired in the past, you don't know if it's been banged up before and it's just on the surface area looks fine, but inside is very broken like many of us. But that's why we're also going to use a dolly. So what I'm going to do is stick a dolly here, just for now. I'm not using it at the moment. I'm just going to put it here so it's close by. I'm going to lift up on the piece. It's stuck on the blanket. It's still stuck on the blanket. I'm going to lift up on the piece to where it's at that point. Now right here, it's like you're venturing towards, those are the wheels. It's like you're venturing towards the danger zone, but you're not quite there yet. I'm going to stick the piece underneath it. Now, I'm going to do this in a really fast motion because I want to minimize the time under tension. So, like Kenny Loggins would say, this is it. Big swoop. So, when I lifted it, I had my hand under this strong control base up here, and I was basically holding the whole piece at once and doing a fast swoop. So I'm controlling that tension all the way through. And in my experience, that helps minimize the potential breaking of legs, because if I were to lift it from one side and it started to kick out on the bottom because I had all my focus up there, I don't have anything keeping me down here. It's going to stop me mid-action. It's going to prolong the situation. And the more time you have under tension, the more likely things are to break. So that's what I found to be helpful. But now I can take the piece out as is. I have enough space on this back side that I can lift it up to get it over the ramp. And that's that. So that's all of the awkward pieces. So hopefully you guys learned something from that. I'm going to load up the rest of the small stuff and then run a trip over, and we'll come back later for the rest. Hopefully you guys learned something from the little techniques. I know sometimes it seems like overkill, but it's all just practices to learn how to handle stuff safely. And once you get good at it, you don't need to really think about it. It's just natural, and you'll know when to use it and when not to use it. So I hope that helps, but I'll see you guys next time. Bye.